Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're exploring a concept that totally shapes our modern world. It dominates our news cycles, it influences exactly how we view power. I'm talking about political and corporate lobbying. Now, in our modern era, we tend to look at the exchange of money for political favor with just deep abhorrence, right? We see it as a complete subversion of justice, a crime against the system. But what if I told you that our modern moral outrage is actually a relatively recent invention? Today we're going to trace the deeply complex and honestly incredibly surprising historical roots of corruption. We'll uncover exactly how trading favors went from being a completely normal, even religiously mandated ancient custom to what we now consider an absolute mortal sin. Let's get into it.
Okay, let's dive right into this. We're going to start with a truly brilliant observation from the 4th century BC. There was this Brahmin minister to an Indian king named Kautilya, and he recognized something just absolutely fundamental about human nature. He saw that the temptation to take a little something off the top, well, that's an inescapable, timeless flaw. He pointed out that trying to figure out if a government servant is skimming money is literally as impossible as trying to figure out if a fish is drinking water while it swims. I mean, it's just happening beneath the surface, constantly.
He actually expanded on this idea with a pretty vivid metaphor. He said, just as it's impossible not to taste the honey, or the poison for that matter, that finds itself on the tip of your tongue, it is impossible for a government servant not to eat up at least a little bit of the king's revenue. To statesmen like Kautilya, this wasn't some shocking front-page scandal. It was just basic human nature. If you're the one handling the king's revenue, you're naturally gonna eat up a tiny piece of it. It was essentially the physics of ancient governance.
So Kautilya actually compiled all these observations into this fascinating text called the Arthashastra. It's basically an ancient instruction manual on material prosperity, or as the economist Amartya Sen simply translates it, economics. Now what's really interesting about this text is that it firmly aligns Kautilya with someone who lived much later, Machiavelli, right? Both of these men operated on the exact same premise. Rulers absolutely must use every single means available to get what they want, while simultaneously holding their subjects to incredibly strict rules of rigor and honesty.
All right, let's travel over to ancient Mesopotamia, because we really need to understand a foundational concept here, the law of reciprocity. Back in antiquity, offering a gift to a leader, that wasn't a crime at all. It was actually expected. The real offense, the thing that would land you in serious trouble, was breaking the sacred logic of the exchange. You give value to receive value. And if that chain was somehow broken, well, that was the true crime.
Now what's really interesting here is seeing this ancient mindset in action. Let's follow the tragicomic steps of The Poor Man of Nippur. This is a story from around 1500 BC, and it all starts with a goat. So there's this poor guy named Gimel, and he wants to improve his situation in life. He brings his only goat to the local mayor as an offering. The mayor happily accepts the goat, throws a huge feast, but then completely insults Gimel by giving him nothing but a bone and some stale beer in return. While Gimel is furious, he goes straight to the king, pays a mina of gold to rent the royal chariot for the day, and then rolls back into his town posing as a high-ranking official. He completely scams the mayor into thinking a chest of royal gold has been stolen while under the mayor's watch, beats him up in retaliation for the whole goat incident, and then actually forces the mayor to pay him off with 2 minas of gold. It is a wild story for sure, but it perfectly captures the ancient rule we're talking about. The mayor's crime wasn't taking the goat. The crime was failing to offer equal value in return.
Author John Thomas Noonan explores this exact story in his book, Bribes, and he points out a really critical societal rule. The misdeeds lay not in the act of corrupting, but in the effect, in breaking one's word. You really have to remember, this was a society where keeping your word wasn't just polite, it was considered a divine characteristic. To understand just how sacred this reciprocity was, we really only need to look at their religious texts. Take this hymn to the sun god, Shamash. It essentially says, if you make a deal, or if you accept a gift with an implied return favor, you are religiously bound to follow through. Your manifest utterance may not be changed. So yeah, there were absolutely no takebacks in Mesopotamian theology.
And this deep-seated belief heavily influenced ancient legal codes. Take Hammurabi, for example. When he wrote about corrupt judges, he used the word tatu, which generically means the offering of a subordinate. For lawmakers back then, the concepts of a standard everyday offering and straight-up corruption completely blurred together. Hammurabi mandated that a judge should be expelled for changing a verdict that was already sealed. Think about that for a second. It's highly likely this harsh punishment wasn't for taking a bribe in the first place, but for failing to deliver on the paid favor once the deal was actually struck.
But did this logic just stop at the courthouse doors? Absolutely not. If we transition from earthly courts to heavenly negotiations, we see that this exact same quid pro quo mentality was the framework humanity used to negotiate with the gods themselves. The trading of favors wasn't just something humans tolerated among themselves, it was literally how you interacted with the divine.
And this brilliantly illustrates just how formalized this all was in the Old Testament. I mean, priests at the ancient sanctuary of Shiloh had a strict contractual right to a literal cut of the meat sacrifices. King Saul couldn't even ask the prophet Samuel for advice without his servant paying a quarter shekel of silver first, just so they wouldn't show up empty-handed. And Jacob literally drafts a conditional contract with the Almighty. He says, if God protects and feeds him, Jacob will give God 1/10 of all his wealth. The underlying message across these societies was crystal clear. Deities naturally favor the rich man who can afford to sacrifice valuable livestock way over the poor man who simply cannot.
Now, okay, to be fair, this isn't to say it was a total free-for-all. God does explicitly warn Moses in the book of Exodus. Listen to this strict warning. And thou shalt take no gift, for the gift blindeth the wise and perverteth the words of the righteous. So the danger of bribery was definitely known. However, the overarching dominant principle of the Middle Eastern society that's mirrored in these scriptures was still one of strict reciprocity. Trading favors was just how you navigated the world, both with your neighbors and with your creator.
But then, history takes a dramatic turn. We hit a massive moral pivot point. As we move into the New Testament era, the very nature of how humanity judges a gift completely transforms. And the foundation of how we view corruption today was really laid during this radical cultural shift.
We can actually see this massive cultural shift right here. On the one hand, you have the ancient quid pro quo, those old contracts with God and the lavish sacrifices you were expected to make for divine favor. And then, opposed to that, the New Testament introduces a radical new concept, the freely given. Think of that famous parable of the poor widow. She gives a miserable, tiny financial offering to the temple treasury, yet her gift is celebrated far, far above the massive donations of the rich. Why? Precisely because she expected absolutely nothing in return. She completely short-circuits the old law of reciprocity. And this right here, this is the exact moment our modern moral compass regarding gifts is born.
So the crucial point is that this new morality immediately clashed with the old ways of doing business, and it created entirely new sins. Enter Simony. Simony is defined as the buying or selling of a church office. Now, when a man named Simon Magus saw the apostles Peter and John granting the Holy Spirit through the laying on of hands, his ancient Middle Eastern instincts just kicked right in. He literally offered them a bag of cash in exchange for the power.
Well, Simon's cash offer earned him a very harsh public accusation from Peter, and it essentially sparked the first ecclesiastical version of corruption. But here's the kicker. While the church harshly condemned buying spiritual favors on paper, they were more than happy to tolerate it in practice for centuries. That is, at least until Martin Luther came along to shut the whole thing down. Let's move on and see how this builds to what is arguably the most infamous exchange of all time, Judas Iscariot. He was the disciple in charge of holding the group's money, right? Well, he takes this ancient concept of exchanging a favor for cash and applies it directly to the life of his master, selling Jesus to the Romans for 30 pieces of silver. Now, in the context of the New Testament, this isn't just a bad business deal or a broken contract. It is a betrayal so profound, so rife with consequences, that Christian tradition views it as a sin without any chance of redemption whatsoever. The exchange of cash for illicit favors was now permanently etched into the cultural consciousness as a world-altering evil.
So, we've tracked this fascinating journey, right? From the unavoidable human nature observed by Cotilia, through the strict goat-trading reciprocity of ancient Mesopotamia, right up to the total moral condemnation we see in early Christianity. We've seen how the religious and legal definitions of a bribe completely flipped upside down. But what happened when this deeply ingrained culture of trading favors collided head-on with the celebrated cradle of democracy, ancient Athens? Well, that is a story for another time, but it's one that will beautifully bridge the gap between ancient goat trading and the corporate lobbying that completely dominates our news today. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. See you next time.